Hey, friend, welcome back to She Said podcast. I'm your host, Laura Cox Kaplan, and I am so glad to have you here today. If you're listening to this in real time, we are wrapping 2025 up very quickly. It's coming at us more quickly than I can really comprehend. And boy, what a year it's been. We have had some incredible conversations with so many remarkable guests on this podcast, including women from the Southern Sea Network as part of that terrific collaboration series that I have done with them for the past 3 years. Now, by the way, we're gearing up for another collaboration series with the Southern Sea in 2026, and I have some really fun surprises coming, including Birdie's founder, Bianca Gates, who will be joining me to talk about how her side hustle grew into a $50+ million business. So you're going to want to be sure and follow or subscribe to this podcast because you will not want to miss a minute of all of those conversations. For today's episode, I want to do something that's a little different. I want to take you on a journey through some of my favorite lessons from the podcast that actually emerged from our conversations this year. And I want to connect those lessons to something that I've spent a lot of time studying and thinking about, especially this year, the science of human flourishing. I think there's never been a more important time to talk about this topic. You've probably heard me talk about this and my near obsession with positive psychology before on this podcast. It's a field that fascinates me because it asks a fundamentally different question than what we typically hear in traditional psychology. Instead of asking what's wrong and how do we fix it, positive psychology asks what helps humans truly thrive proactively. And that proactive mindset is particularly appealing to me. And I think it has actually been a thread running through this podcast since the very beginning. Earlier this year, I got certifications in positive psychology in order to better understand the science as well as the tools and to really anchor this content more fully in those findings. And then as I sat down and I started going back and reviewing our 2025 episodes, the themes that kept emerging, things like mentorship and reinvention and pivots and celebration and intention and risk and pauses and authentic connection and relationships, all those things and so much more, they all map so beautifully onto what researchers have identified as the key pillars of human flourishing. So today, I want to share a few of my very favorite lessons from 2025 and show you how those lessons connect to this powerful framework. My hope is that you'll walk away not just inspired, but actually equipped with science-backed tools for making 2026 your most fulfilling year yet. So let's dive in. Now, before we get into the lessons themselves, let me briefly introduce the 5-part framework that I'm going to be weaving through this episode. It was developed by Dr. Martin Seligman, who's often called the father of positive psychology. And the framework is essentially called PERMA or PERMA. And it identifies the 5 essential elements that contribute to human well-being and flourishing. The first stands for positive emotion, experiencing joy, gratitude, hope, and contentment. The E is for engagement, being fully absorbed in activities that challenge and fulfill us. You might also know this as getting into a state of flow. And then R represents relationships or maybe connection, the positive connections that we have with others. And spoiler alert, this one shows up again and again and again in our 2025 conversations. M stands for meaning, essentially belonging to and serving something bigger than ourselves. And then A stands for accomplishment, the pursuit and achievement of goals, that sense of mastery and maybe progress. But there's a couple of other dimensions that I think are important. Intention and awareness. Those are really important to be mindful of. And while they are not part of the official positive psychology framework, I like to think of them as an operating system that essentially runs underneath all five of those key dimensions. Awareness is kind of like the dashboard, while intention is how you steer to the other dimensions. Now, here's what's really fascinating. When I looked at the themes from our 32 episodes this year of the podcast, I realized that my guests weren't just sharing career advice or life hacks. They were often unknowingly describing the very elements that science tells us leads to a flourishing life. So let's walk through what we learned dimension by dimension, starting with positive emotion. One of the conversations that I especially loved this year was with Darcy Miller. Now, Darcy is the legendary celebration expert and founding editor of Martha Stewart Weddings. She is also a protege and longtime friend of Martha Stewart. And Darcy said something that really stuck with me. She said, celebration isn't just about throwing parties. It's a practice of gratitude and connection and really honoring life's moments, big and small. Just think about that. How often do we rush past our wins? We accomplish something meaningful, and instead of pausing to celebrate, we're more likely to immediately move on to the next item on our to-do list. Goodness knows I've been guilty of this. Darcy reminded us that creating rituals around celebration, things like keeping memory books and marking small milestones and being intentional about joy is not frivolous. It's actually essential for well-being. And this connects directly and very tangibly to what positive psychology research tells us, that savoring positive experiences, really letting them land into our consciousness, that amplifies their impact on our happiness by boosting positive emotion. Another dimension of this is actually how we think about those experiences in the first place and the stories that we tell ourselves about those experiences and how they impact our mindset. Now, this is a concept that can either fuel our flourishing or quietly sabotage it. I know you're familiar with that narrative that oftentimes can run in the background. Sometimes it's so familiar that we don't even notice it anymore. It might be a running mantra like, I'm not ready, or who am I to do this, or, oh, that wasn't really a big deal, or I should be further along in this project by now, or maybe I'm not the kind of person who does whatever. These inner narratives can shape everything. They determine whether we are able to savor a win or rush past it. They influence whether we reach out for connection or whether we hold back. They can either whisper that our experiences don't count, or they can remind us that everything we've been through has actually built something really valuable. Here's what I've learned. We cannot always control the circumstances of our lives, but we can learn to check the narrative. We can ask, is this story that I'm telling myself true? Is it helpful? Is it the story that I want to keep telling? Because the stories we tell ourselves become the lives we live. This is one of the tools that I keep coming back to again and again in my work around authentic influence, really checking that inner narrative. It's the first step in building influence from the inside out. Before we can lead others, before we can connect meaningfully, before we can find and really live our purpose, we have to get honest about the stories that are running through our heads. Because when we clear away those limiting stories, we create more space to actually connect more fully with our purpose. So here's my invitation for you as we head into this new year. What if you committed to celebrating more? Not just the big promotions and those major milestones, but the small and hopefully more frequent wins. Maybe the project that you finished or the difficult conversation that you finally had. Maybe that random Tuesday when everything just worked. And then think about the stories that you're telling yourself, especially those experiences that, I don't know, maybe didn't work out quite as well as you had hoped. What's something that you learned from the experience that can help you reframe it more positively? Positive emotions aren't just nice to have. They broaden our thinking, they build our resilience, and they create an upward spiral that makes us more creative and ultimately more connected. And they also tend to have a cumulative effect. One other practical tool, and I talked about this in episode 315 at the very beginning of this past year, choosing a word of the year. Now, mine for 2025 was leverage, with a close second being intentional. And those words really shaped things for me this year. Having that kind of North Star helped me experience more positive emotions. I was reminding myself to make choices that aligned with my values rather than just reacting to what landed in my inbox. And I found myself more focused and more aware of the ways that I could then leverage what I already had or what I was already doing, and that could give me more time for the people and projects that were important to me. So, lesson 1 from 2025, think of celebration as a leadership practice. Joy can, in fact, be strategic. So gather up all those wins, big and small, from this past year and take a minute to really celebrate them. Try not to rush past them. Okay, the second pillar in the positive psychology framework is engagement, that sense of being fully absorbed in what you're doing. This year, we had a powerful conversation with Harvard Business Review's Kevin Evers. Now, Kevin wrote a book called There Is Nothing Like This, The Strategic Genius of Taylor Swift. Now, okay, friend, stay with me here. Even if you're not a Swiftie, there is something profound in studying someone who has achieved real mastery in her craft. What Kevin and I talked about is that Taylor Swift's success isn't just about talent. It's about deep engagement, about constant reinvention, about trying new things and powerful storytelling, and really connecting with her audience in ways that evolve as she has evolved. When we are so fully absorbed in our work or our mission, it creates what psychologists call flow. And here's the thing about engagement. It requires challenge. We don't find flow in those easy tasks. We actually find it when we're stretched just enough, when the difficulty of the task actually matches our skill level. Now, this concept connects to another powerful lesson from 2025, getting beyond busy. In my conversation with lawyer turned executive coach Shante Grant, Shante also joined me as part of our Southern Sea collaboration series. We explored how being perpetually busy can actually prevent engagement. Sounds kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? But when we're scattered across 100 shallow tasks, we never sink deep enough into any one thing in order to experience that state of flow. The constant state of busy also tends to undercut our influence because we appear scattered and not as competent as what we really are. As a card-carrying, partially reformed member of the Busy Girl Club, you can trust me on this one. So here's the lesson, friend. True engagement requires depth over breadth, and busyness tends to be the enemy of flow. As you think about heading into 2026, ask yourself, where am I going through the motions? And maybe where could I go deeper? What would it look like to be fully absorbed in the work that matters most to you? Now, sometimes that means saying no to some good opportunities so that you can say yes to really great ones. Sometimes it means protecting time for the work that puts you in flow, even when the urgent demands of emails and meetings and all those things are calling. I know how many things you have on your plate, and I also know that you are probably the only person who can truly decide which things must be there and which things might be better pushed to someone else or to another day or season. But when you tap into these dimensions that I'm talking today, making those decisions becomes a heck of a lot easier. Okay, now we come to the pillar that I think showed up most consistently across our 2025 conversations: relationships and connections. If there's one theme that emerged over and over and over again, it's this: we don't flourish alone. So let's start with mentorship. My dear friend, Dina Powell McCormick, who co-wrote a fabulous book on the topic called Who Believed in You, she joined me for such a special episode. It was really special to me. Not only was I spending time with a dear friend, but the topic of mentorship is one that inspired me to reflect on and really reach out to a number of my own mentors from earlier in my career. Dina also talked about the difference between transactional mentorship, where someone helps you get a job or maybe makes a connection for you, and the difference between that and transformational mentorship, essentially where someone sees potential in you that you can't see in yourself. And as I reflected on that, this very podcast was in many ways the result of that, because a dear friend called me up and said, "Have you ever thought of turning this content into a podcast?" That friend actually created just the nudge that I needed, and that was 8 years ago. And I will always be grateful for that. But that distinction is really important. Friend, as you think about your own life, who believed in you before you believed in yourself? Is it a teacher, a boss, hopefully your parents, maybe a friend who said you should just go for it? Those relationships literally shape our trajectories. But here's what I want you to also consider. Mentorship isn't just about receiving. It's reciprocal. When we invest in others, we ourselves also grow. And we get a wonderful boost from knowing that we've invested in someone else. Building that bridge actually works both ways. And it's a powerful way of creating not only a stronger relationship, but lots of positive emotion as well. Another great example was when Harvard Business School professor Alison Woodbrooks joined me to talk about her book called Talk. In her research, she found that we often underestimate our ability to connect with others through conversation. Most of us actually think we're worse communicators than we actually are. And her research shows that with preparation and with, most importantly, genuine curiosity about the other person, we can all become better at the conversations that build relationships. And with those conversations, again, comes positive emotion. And then Professor of Human Behavior Melody Wilding taught us the importance of managing up, which at its core is about building a strong relationship with your leader, with your manager, or maybe even your board. When we understand that leader's priorities and pressures, we can communicate more effectively and ultimately build more trust. And then another of my favorite conversations this year, also part of our Southern Sea collaboration series, it was with Mariah Grumet Humbert. She is a modern etiquette expert. And here's what struck me about my conversation with Mariah, who I just really loved. Mariah reframed etiquette entirely. She talks about the fact that it's not about rigid rules or knowing which fork to use, although those things can be important. It's actually about helping others feel seen and included and comfortable. Just think about that. The essence of etiquette is actually the essence of connection, of creating space where people feel like they belong. Whether it's remembering someone's name or making thoughtful introductions or simply being present in a conversation, these small acts of consideration build the kind of trust that helps deepen relationships. So etiquette, when done right, is generosity in action. So here's the lesson from positive psychology on relationships. Connection isn't just nice. It's necessary for flourishing. It's incredibly valuable to invest in mentorship, both giving and receiving. And it's important to build your community intentionally. And to remember all those small courtesies, like helping others feel seen, and how those things can compound into meaningful relationships over time. Friend, as you head into 2026, I want you to think about your own relationship portfolio. Who are your mentors and who are you mentoring? Where do you find community? And hopefully it's not just in one place. And are you investing enough in the relationships that matter most to you? The fourth pillar of positive psychology is meaning, belonging to something and serving something that is bigger than ourselves. I want to share two really powerful stories from this year that I think illustrate meaning in profoundly different ways. The first is from my conversation with our very first male guest on this podcast, my friend Jim Toohey, who was Mother Teresa's lawyer and close friend. Now, you might not immediately think of a nun as an entrepreneur, and you also might be curious about why Mother Teresa actually needed a lawyer. I'm going to let you listen to the full episode with Jim for that. But related to Mother Teresa's entrepreneurial spirit, Jim makes the case, a very compelling case, that Mother Teresa was one of the most effective organizational builders in modern history. She did this despite the fact that she had no formal business training, no fundraising strategy, no venture capital, no corporate donors, and yet she built a global organization that has served millions of people and continues to do so. How did she do that? Through purpose and meaning and a clear sense of serving something beyond herself, and also a clear recognition of the power of individuals and of intentional effort. Jim shared with us that Mother Teresa's motto was one by one by one. Essentially, every single person mattered. That's a really powerful message, especially right now at the holidays, but honestly, always. Then the second story comes from one of our fall episodes, my conversation with Israeli-based tour guide, storyteller, and religious history scholar Yael Goodman, my good friend. And I have to tell you, this conversation with Yael moved me so deeply. Yael is the founder of Run JLM. That's a running tour company that invites people, as she puts it, to run through thousands of years of history while connecting to the land, to each other, and to themselves. Her work has always been about forging connections across faiths and traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Then came October 7th, 2023. In the aftermath of that unimaginable horror, Yael didn't abandon who she was, nor did she do what everyone else was doing. Instead, she repurposed who she was. She channeled her passion for movement and community and healing into supporting evacuees and survivors and soldiers. She fostered special running groups to offer both physical and emotional recovery at a time of national tragedy. But, what struck me most about our conversation was this idea. To use what you have and where you are. You don't have to do what everyone else is doing. Yael didn't wait until she had a perfect plan or the right resources or someone else's permission. She took the skills that she already possessed, her ability to bring people together through movement and story, and she deployed those skills in the service of healing. That, my friend, is meaning in action. Now, a very different take on this concept is Dr. Ann Welsh, who shared something with us called the ambition paradox. Now, we often think about ambition as climbing higher, more titles, more money, more recognition. But Ann's research shows that for many women, especially mothers, ambition expands wider and deeper rather than just upward. It becomes about impact, about legacy, about contribution, but the underlying value is all about meaning. And this brings me to something that's related that I've been writing about and thinking about, and it's a concept called experience equity. It's the idea that everything you've lived through, your professional roles, yes, but also your personal experiences, where you grew up, where you come from, your caregiving, your volunteer work, your setbacks, your pivots, all of it compounds over time like interest in a bank account. experience equity is broader than that concept of transferable skills that we sometimes hear about. Instead, it is a full inventory of who you've become. Too often, we discount the experiences that didn't come with a paycheck or a title, and we minimize the years that are spent raising children or caring for aging parents or maybe leading the PTA or navigating a health crisis. When we focus on experience equity, it reminds us to claim all of it, both the personal experiences and the professional experiences, to recognize that the unconventional path isn't a deficit. It can be a differentiator. When we combine that understanding of our experience equity with a focus on meaning and living for purposes and causes that are bigger than us, that, my friend, is where the incredible magic really happens. The late Phyllis Hoffman DiPiano is another wonderful example of this. Her son, Brian, joined me to talk about how Phyllis built Hoffman Media and how her early commitment to her family, as well as to her readers, meant passing up on lucrative deals early on. But the choices she made ultimately anchored her company more firmly in its core values. Today, Hoffman Media is thriving at a time when traditional media is really struggling. Phyllis's business success flowed from meaning and from purpose and from values. And her full experience as a mother, as a creative, as a community builder was really her equity. So here's what I've learned. When we connect our daily work to a larger purpose, everything changes. The hard days become more bearable. The setbacks become lessons rather than failures. The wins become more satisfying because they're in service of something that really matters. And sometimes, as Yael's story reminds us, purpose finds us. We don't always get to choose the circumstances, but we always get to choose how we respond. We always get to ask, what do I have? Where am I now? And how can I use that to really serve? The lesson here, purpose isn't a luxury, it's foundational. You can use what you have and where you are. But remember to spend time understanding and really claiming your full experience equity. As you reflect on 2025 and look ahead to 2026, ask yourself, what gives my work meaning today? How does what I do contribute to something that's larger? And if you're struggling to answer that question, maybe that's the most important topic for exploration for you in the year ahead. The final pillar of positive psychology is accomplishment, essentially the pursuit of achievement and mastery and success. Now, I want to be careful here because I think we oftentimes overemphasize achievement at the expense of the other pillars. But accomplishment without positive emotion, without engagement, relationships, and meaning can leave us feeling really empty, like we've climbed a ladder only to find that it was leaning against the wrong wall. I can't tell you the number of conversations that I've had with women on this podcast that illustrated that very concept. But healthy striving, pursuing goals that align with our values, experiencing the satisfaction of growth and mastery is absolutely essential for flourishing. Lorena Yee from McKinsey challenged us to think about building the right kind of currency for our careers. Are we investing in the skills and relationships and visibility that actually matter for where we want to go? Strategic accomplishment requires intention, as I've mentioned before. It's also similar to the concept of experience equity that I mentioned earlier. So it's also an accomplishment reframe, if you will. And then in episode 333, right before my summer pause, I talked about how strategic breaks can actually support accomplishment. Rest isn't the opposite of productivity. It's essential to it. And goodness knows I've had trouble learning this lesson. But oftentimes I have found, and you probably have too, our best ideas often come when we stop forcing them. So the lesson here is to pursue goals that align with your values, but to remember that rest is part of the accomplishment equation, not the enemy of it. So, friend, there you have it. Just a few of my favorite lessons from 2025, all woven through this lens of what science tells us about human flourishing: positive emotions, engagement, relationships, the stories we tell ourselves, meaning, accomplishment, intention, and awareness. And as I look back on this year, I'm struck by how consistently these themes emerged from conversations with people across industries: finance, fashion, media, psychology, entrepreneurship, and more. And it tells me that these aren't just nice to have ideas. These are fundamental truths about what helps humans to thrive. So, friend, my hope for you in 2026 is that you'll think about this framework, maybe as a compass. Maybe when something feels off, ask yourself, which of these pillars might need my attention? Or when things are really going well, maybe notice which elements are present and maybe take a moment to just stop and be grateful for that and really celebrate it. And then when your inner narrative starts to limit you, pause and ask, is this the story that I want to keep telling? Is this even an accurate reflection of what's real? Friend, most of all, thank you for being part of She Said, She Said, for showing up here with me each week, for sharing these episodes with friends, for leaving your reviews, for sending me notes about how conversations have landed for you, for all of it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Truly, I am really grateful. This work, this podcast is meaningful to me because of you. I'm going to be taking a couple of weeks off to enjoy the holiday, but I will be coming back to you really soon with some strategies for how you might want to launch 2026. And I will also be sharing my word of the year. Have you started to think about yours? I'd love to hear what it is and what processes that you engage in that really help you get your year started off right. For now, though, I'm Laura Cox Kaplan. This is She Said, She Said podcast, a weekly production of She Said, She Said Media. Have a great and wonderful holiday, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Take care.